When I first saw this shot, I thought Vecna was creating the fire. However, as I advance it frame by frame, focus on the center of the screen, the fire is clearly moving towards Vecna. He's trying to fend it off, and it's coming from some unknown source. I think Will Byers gets powers, possibly fire powers, in Season 5 of Stranger Things, and in this video, I'll talk about why that's possible plot-wise, and why it would make sense thematically. I'm going to try to use my lawyer's analytical eye to look at my accumulated knowledge about this show, all the teasers that we've gotten, movies that were inspiration for this show, and Dungeons & Dragons books. First off, let me introduce myself. I am Ronald Off the Record, a lawyer who comments on entertainment I really enjoy. I hope to bring analysis and heart to the conversation. I also have a much larger channel at the time of this recording called The Rules Lawyer, where I cover tabletop RPGs, including Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder. Okay, to start off, this video is in the spirit of fun speculation. I can't know for sure what will happen in the new season. I haven't seen it yet. But I think everything I say today is grounded in evidence and can be derived from reasonable deduction. If you look online, a lot of fans of the show are already speculating that Will gets powers. As for what I think, here is my first display of what I call the willpower meter, the percentage chance that I think Will develops new powers. As of today, I put it at around 60%. People who know my channel know that I am a big fan of the Byler ship, the romantic possibility between Mike and Will. As of today, I put that at 80%. Now, I 100% am sure, though, that the creators have prepared a Byler conclusion, and 100% that would be a better story. I did an almost 3-hour video going over the evidence of that, link in the description. Now, what do I mean by powers? Let's establish first of all that Will Byers already has powers in Stranger Things. The question really is, will he get more powers? Because what can he do already? He can sense the presence of something from the Upside Down, or developments in the Upside Down, which is pretty amazing.
You're like a spy now. A super spy.
And the show establishes that the monsters are part of a hive mind, and Will is part of that hive mind. Will also has what the parties call true sight.
You somehow acquired true sight.
True sight gives you the power to see into the ethereal plane.
He's able to see into the Upside Down, although up to this point it has been involuntary. And at the end of Season 4, Will shares with Mike that he can feel Vecna's feelings and sense his thoughts and plans.
I can feel him. He's hurting. I can still remember what he thinks and how he thinks, and he's not going to stop. Ever.
Will be the party's Vecna-dar in Season 5, which is pretty amazing and going to be very important, surely. All this establishes that Will is already part of the supernatural network. This is a show where telekinesis and psychic powers already exist, so who's to say that Will not get more powers? Next, there are many unanswered questions about Will that have to be answered. First, Will doesn't remember what happened when he was taken into the Upside Down in Season 1. When he wakes up in the hospital, he's strangely serene.
Where am I? Are you okay?
Elle in Season 4 had a whole arc of plumbing her buried memories in order to get her powers back. We surely are getting flashbacks to Will's time in the Upside Down this season. So what happened here? Is it PTSD, or is there some supernatural reason that he doesn't remember? Next, how did he survive for an entire week in the Upside Down? A young kid without any resources. Barbara, a teenager, was immediately killed by the Demogorgon. Also, how is he able to communicate with his mother? And the Demogorgon was nearby. How did he survive that? Next, why is the Upside Down dated the night Will was taken? Nancy found her diary in the Upside Down, with the last entry being the night Will was taken. Was that the night the Upside Down was created? What would that have to do with taking Will? And perhaps the Upside Down's creation is something Will did himself. I read online a theory that Will created this copy of Hawkins as a desperate attempt to return home. Next, why was Will taken? And this is the big question, because multiple times in Season 1, the Demogorgon goes after somebody and is attracted by blood. Will, meanwhile, was just riding his bike alone. Also, there are hints that it was not a Demogorgon, but something more sinister, something that had the ability to open doors telekinetically. So there are theories that that was Vecna. If it was, then why would Vecna go after Will? Next are things that further suggest that Will has powers. One possible reason that Will was targeted, and this is why the idea that he has powers is so popular online is the fact that Vecna can claim people's powers. In the season 4 finale, Vecna taunts El and explains that he got his power to open gates by absorbing some of her ability because she was responsible for opening gates and closing them in Hawkins.
So I sought a means to open my own doors. I sought your power.
All this time, we've been building it for you.
She lost her powers not that long after the Flesh Flayer bit her, possibly because they were being taken by Vecna. So what if Will has powers that Vecna obtained in season 1 that have, like El, been dormant for a while afterward? Also, since his time in the Upside Down, something about Will keeps him connected to it. There is something supernatural about him that causes this. He is a conduit for the Upside Down to reach into Hawkins. In season 2, this means he can look into the parallel reality of Hawkins in the Upside Down. He somehow exists in both realities simultaneously. And every season of Stranger Things involves the Upside Down being more successful at penetrating into the real world. Next, the show presents a history and a childhood of Henry Creel, one who eventually becomes Vecna, that parallels that of Will. First, Henry grew up feeling different and isolated from the other kids.
I didn't fit in with the other children. Something was wrong with me. All the teachers and the doctors said I was broken.
And listen to how his father, Victor Creel, describes him.
Henry, my boy, he was a sensitive child.
A sensitive child. And you may have caught on that the only other time that phrase has been used in this series is by Joyce describing his son Will, who is suspected of being gay. The phrase is also used by adults to describe boys that they think are gay and or actually are gay. So Henry is gay-coded, and whether he's actually gay or bi is beside the point. The point is that he grew up feeling isolated and being told he was broken, just as Will grew up feeling like he's a mistake. There seem to be other ways this show has paralleled Will and Henry. See the similarity here between their outfits. This show seems to be setting up Henry and Will to be dramatic foils for each other. A foil is a character who contrasts with another character, typically a character who contrasts with a protagonist, someone like Will this season, in order to better highlight or differentiate certain qualities of the protagonist. A foil to the protagonist may also be the antagonist of the plot, like Vecna. This sequence from season 4 implies that young Henry was getting visions and being stalked by the Mind Flayer himself and making artwork, drawing what he sees, including this drawing of the Mind Flayer. Exactly what happens with Will in season 2. And this is apparently confirmed in the stage play The First Shadow, which is officially canon. It's a prequel to Stranger Things covering Henry Creel's childhood. Spoilers for that stage play forthcoming. Henry was a regular boy who disappeared in an alternate dimension for 12 hours and came back completely changed, under heavy influence by the Mind Flayer. Like Will, he was bullied for being different, and the Mind Flayer manipulated him and prompted him to kill his family. I'll leave a link in the video description to the Reddit post where someone generously went through a detailed synopsis of the stage play's plot. There's a classic trope in supernatural stories involving having two characters who face horrible circumstances in their childhood, who eventually come up with a choice, who attain power, who have a choice between lashing back at the world that wronged them and being nihilistic, or staying true to their morals and to justice and to right. One chooses the isolated, lonely, evil road and feels justified doing it, while the other, who usually has the support network of friends and family, makes another choice. And the story is usually the playing out of the protagonist being tempted by and resisting the dark side. We've already seen that arc in this show with Elle meeting her sister Kelly. This show might explore that with Will having a similar choice as Henry on how to deal with having powers of his own. Next, there was a moment in season 1 where Elle recognized Will. What if she recognizes him because he was in Dr. Brenner's lab along with the other kids? This is a show with a secret, shady government project, and there are ways to keep parents in the dark as to what's going on with their kids. Also for season 5, they put out a casting call for an 8-year-old Will Byers. That would be set in 1979, which was the same year that all hell broke loose in Hawkins' lab that's portrayed in season 4 in Elle's memories. This is admittedly strange. Why would Elle not bring this up again? Perhaps it was a glimmer of a memory, a feeling like deja vu. This show establishes that Elle's memories can be buried, and it took a special device and specific videotapes to restore her memories in the Nina Project. Now, one might say that Elle recognized Will because she was aware of his then presence in the Upside Down, and that this would be a retcon. Well, one could fairly argue that the entire 1979 plotline with a lab full of kids, where Elle has amazing powers as a tiny super kid among super kids, and is able to defeat a not yet introduced character, Vecna, was a retcon that the writers came up with after they realized their show would go longer than one season. This would be no more out of left field than that. Next, that episode featuring a flashback of a young Will is episode 4, and it's titled Sorcerer. And here's proof of that. The episode titles were revealed by Netflix last year. We also now know that episode 4 is the finale of Volume 1 that releases on November 26th, before Volume 2, which is a month later. So if it's like Season 4, which ended with a big revelation and cliffhanger about who Vecna is, then we likely will have a big revelation and cliffhanger in episode 4 titled Sorcerer. You can all see what I'm getting at here. A sorcerer is someone who casts spells. Now, I'm going to be incredibly persnickety and expose my D&D nerddom by pointing out that actually sorcerers were not a class in D&D in the 1980s at the time the show is set. Rather, it was one of the titles you got as you advanced in level as a magic user. However, the general point is made, and in the modern version of D&D, the title sorcerer is going to be significant for our purpose of looking at whether Will has fire powers. Also, this flashback features casting a young Mike and Jonathan. So this episode might feature key flashbacks, both to Will's time in the Upside Down and to his being 8 years old, which might be connected to Will having powers. Next, Will is repeatedly described as the cleric of the party, of the core 4 who play Dungeons & Dragons.
I'm our paladin. Will's our cleric.
He's also called Will the Wise, and clerics are the big wisdom-based spellcasters in D&D. And yes, I'm a big D&D nerd and Pathfinder nerd. Check out my Rules Warrior channel. Clerics, unlike wizards or magic users in old D&D, are less flashy. They do fewer big dramatic things like Elle does in this show, who Mike calls the wizard. Rather, they're able to do more subtle things like cast True Seeing, which is a cleric spell, and also Astral Spell, which allows a cleric to travel between different dimensions, and also take others with them. That would be a cool possibility. Next, Will's name. It's Will. And when we look in the dictionary, one definition is mental powers manifested as wishing, choosing, desiring, or intending. We associate the word will with an exertion of what you want. It's a word we often pair with power, and we have a word called willpower. I also like this definition and chose it because of these other sentences. A disposition to act according to principles or ends, and the collective desire of a group, which both suggest Will's personal arc of becoming more assertive and a leader. And this Season 5 preview poster shows Will in front of the group, leading them. All of which could be parallels to and represented metaphorically, as supernatural stories often do represent things metaphorically, through powers. Which dovetails with the next point, that Will goes through a personal arc this season. Numerous statements and preview materials strongly suggest that he is the quote-unquote main character this season and goes through personal change. Will's actor, Noah Schnapp, said the following to Forbes: "I can just tell you that I'm very, very excited for what's to come. I think they did a great job with Will's character this season and beautifully addressed everything they needed to. The way they closed the show is just perfect. The story started with Will, and it'll end with Will." This is further confirmed by Ross Duffer, one of the two show creators. He says, "Will really takes center stage again in 5. This emotional arc for him is what we feel is going to hopefully tie the whole series together. Will is used to being the young one, the introverted one, the one that's being protected. So part of his journey, it's not just sexuality, it's Will coming into his own as a young man." So we're clearly not just talking about what I would call A-plot stuff here, his kidnapping and answer to why he was targeted and why the Upside Down was created. Season 5 will also culminate Will's emotional journey. For 4 seasons, he's been a victim abused and bullied by his father and other people.
Yes, they're mean. They make fun of him. They call him names. Lonnie used to say he was queer, called him a fag.
He's kidnapped, he's tortured, he's made to feel he's burned alive, he's ignored by his friends, he's dealing with the pain and loneliness of being gay and in the closet in a small town in the 1980s, and being in love with his best friend, and never feeling like he's going to find love. So season 5 has to be Will gaining power in some way, in possibly more than one way. Not just a mundane way, standing up for himself, coming out of the closet, but in a supernatural way, in a way that parallels his emotional arc. Before looking at the teaser scenes and material that suggests that Will might get more spectacular powers in season 5, let's first acknowledge that he might develop more subtle powers. Powers that are less like what El, the wizard, can do, and things that are rooted in his connection to the Upside Down and the supernatural. Perhaps he develops his ability to be what Mike called a super spy. His sense has already heightened by the end of season 4, possibly because of Vecna's reach into Hawkins. He not only can sense Vecna's presence, he also seems to be able to feel what Vecna feels moment to moment. This is valuable information for the gang, obviously. Next, perhaps his connection to the hive mind means that he can have some control over the hive mind, much in the same way that a hacker can affect a network. Obviously not out of the question, and perhaps his connection to the hive mind gives him the ability to eliminate the Upside Down or to close the gates forever. In Will's famous run shot, it looks like his connection to Vecna is in full display. It looks like he's fighting back rage, feeling what Vecna feels, perhaps knowing what his immediate plans are and struggling to warn his friends. And perhaps he feels he's about to be possessed and that he himself is the danger. Because why look up? And it's clearly something that his friends don't see. In D&D, there's a spell called Clairvoyance that allows a caster to look into another place. In the latest teaser, we see a zoom in to someone's eye, likely Will's, and it cuts immediately to one of the tunnels in the Upside Down, or under Hawkins. It's possible Will has enhanced his powers to not be able to just sense things vaguely, but to see things clearly. Let's also remember that clairvoyance and seeing far away is one of Vecna's powers as well. And the teaser poster for Season 5 shows that Vecna is missing an eye. This was a deliberate choice. Perhaps it's a reference to him getting injured at the end of Season 4. Or maybe it's a reference to an actual artifact in the D&D game called the Eye of Vecna, which adventurers can get, that allows them to get many powers, including magical vision. Perhaps Will's connection to the hive mind and to Vecna includes some sharing of Vecna's powers. Will warning his friends to go away, and the fact that there's some threat that the others don't see suggests that he might be the threat himself. Perhaps he's about to be controlled by Vecna, and perhaps Will has powers that Vecna will use, or perhaps Will is a conduit for channeling Vecna's powers. I want to note also that right now Will is not possessed in this shot. The show establishes that Will's eyes turn from green to dark brown the more he gets possessed. So Will is Will here. So what's going on is possibly that his general sensory powers have increased, or he's actually projecting his sight somewhere the way El can. Perhaps after this point he will be possessed or become a sleeper agent for Vecna. There's a video on my channel where I ask, does Will have a villain arc this season? It's just one part of my overall analysis of the first teaser, where basically Vecna uses Will to do horrible things. Remember the Eye of Vecna? Well, in D&D, using it required gouging out your own eye and inserting it, and it also made you evil. You essentially merge yourself with an aspect of Vecna, and if you remove it, you die. And Will may indeed harm people he loves. This show has tortured Will every season, and while I think he'll have a happy ending, they're likely going to torture him more and far more than they have before. Giving him the guilt of killing someone he loves is a possibility. Next, we see the shot of Will in the Upside Down with a Demogorgon going after him. And here's the first frame, and I just want to point out that Will's foot is on this tree branch. I first thought when I first saw this that this is just him falling from the sky. But no, he is being chased by the Demogorgon, who's clearly climbing up after him, and Will is jumping across to this other tree. So clearly Will has the power of parkour. Will is being a badass in Season 1. And remember, he was very capable with that gun when he was approached by the monster. He was terrified, but capable. Yet he survived for a week somehow while being chased. Either he has powers and some capacity he doesn't remember anymore, or Vecna / the Mind Flayer intervened and decided to keep him alive. Either way, both possibilities point toward Will possibly having powers. Now let's talk about Will possibly having firepower, pyrokinesis, the ability to manipulate flame and create flame. I need to give credit to Third Duffer on TikTok, who started the wheels turning in my mind with this video. I'll link it in the description, where she theorizes that Will has fire powers. We see hints of this in the teaser, and this is a show that openly and blatantly takes inspiration from 1980s sci-fi thrillers. And we'll look at two films today that kind of perfectly fit this show and fit Will having powers. This show takes a lot of inspiration from the 1984 film Firestarter, and I mean a lot of inspiration. Just listen to the synopsis. Drew Barrymore is Charlie, an 8-year-old girl who has pyrokinetic powers. I will give big spoilers in this video, by the way. You have been warned. She has these powers because her parents were given drugs by a secret government agency called the Shop. Those drugs gave her parents psychic abilities, and she was born to them and developed her own. The Shop tries to take her and her family. They want to experiment on them and weaponize their abilities. They kill Charlie's mother, and the film is mostly Charlie and her dad fleeing this government agency. This is the movie that gave us the classic nosebleed when someone uses their powers in this show.
You killed my wife. You're blind.
As you can tell, Stranger Things has already taken a lot of inspiration from Firestarter. It describes Dr. Brenner's project almost to a T and Elle's experience. Meanwhile, let's look at this final shot from the latest teaser where Vecna is in a shot with a lot of fire. When I first saw this shot, I thought Vecna was creating the fire. However, as I advance it frame by frame, focus on the center of the screen, the fire is clearly moving towards Vecna. He's trying to fend it off, and it's coming from some unknown source. Meanwhile, the show has, more than once, had Will cast Fireball. He does so in his first scene.
And fireball!
He does so again when they play D&D at the end of Season 1.
Fireball, the son of a bitch.
14! Will watches fireball hits the Thessalhydra!
Both times, whether Will succeeds casting Fireball determines whether the party wins or loses. This could be a direct foreshadowing. Now, I know that Will is a cleric and that clerics in 1980s D&D could not cast Fireball, unless he was playing the Advanced Edition and was a half-elf who multi-classed cleric magic user, but you didn't tune into this channel today for that. You can go to my Rules Lawyer channel for D&D nerddom. Besides, this show doesn't accurately depict D&D anyway. Speaking of, the episode that I think Will's powers will be revealed in, episode 4, titled Sorcerer, is named after a class that is very different from clerics. Also, they were introduced into D&D after the 1980s. Again, I'm a bit irked that they may be referring to future D&D in this 1980s show. However, most of the audience and people who've been doing analyses online have been basically Googling to get information about D&D and getting information about the latest 2024 edition of the game. So that's what I'm assuming the Duffer Brothers will be assuming people will be doing to understand the D&D terms that they use in the show. Which, I guess, they've already been taking liberties with D&D anyway. So I'll be referring here to D&D from today. In modern D&D, sorcerers are in contrast to magic users or mages, which L is considered to be one. They're now called wizards in today's D&D. And as opposed to wizards who get their magic from study and discipline, sorcerers get their power from their blood, or by exposure to something. Perhaps exposure to another dimension like the Upside Down, or to another dimension, the way Henry got his powers from Dimension X. Sorcerers don't learn magic. The raw, roiling power of magic is part of them, and the essential art of a sorcerer is learning to harness and channel that innate magic. So you get a sense of something that's deep within you that wells up out of you that you have trouble controlling. In modern D&D, sorcerers have bloodlines that fuel their magic, and the ones that are most well-known are from dragons, such as fire-breathing dragons, and the other one is wild magic, which has unpredictable effects. This all is very much on theme with fire, but also the fact that sorcerers, in contrast to L, are much more volatile and struggle to control their power is very much in line with what I'll be saying about Will's likely character arcs and plotlines this season. Next, the show establishes that fire is the best way to deal with the monsters. It's key to dealing with the Demogorgon in the Russian prison, as bullets don't seem to do anything. Fire was also part of bringing down Vecna at the end of Season 4. And remember in Season 2, Will saying he likes it cold? The tunnels under Hawkins spread when the lab used fire on the gate, as if the tunnels were fleeing the fire, and they needed heat to drive the Mind Flayer out of Will. Everything associated with Vecna and the Hive Mind and the Upside Down clearly hates heat and fire. In the new teaser, Mike says,
"Burn commencing in 5."
Now, is this the party using fire to harm the Hive Mind? Or maybe they're listening in on the government, which is using fire for the same reason. Again, fire is effective. Next, the teaser suggests that Vecna is looking for Will. Remember, the Upside Down has a history with Will, and he's the most logical person for Vecna to go after, together with El. So maybe Vecna is going after Will because he knows Will has fire powers or is going to develop them, and he's the main obstacle to Vecna's plans, and Vecna wants to neutralize Will or take Will's powers for himself. At the very end of the latest teaser, Vecna says,
"Found you."
And there's a collection of shots that seem to establish that Vecna is going after Will. In the shot with Vecna and the fire, we see in the upper right corner, it's very hard to see here, so I used Photoshop to make it clearer. There is Melvald's General Store. That's the store that Joyce worked at in the first 2 seasons. So they're in downtown Hawkins. The other shots establish that this is where Joyce and Mike are. Mike is standing here right in front of Melvald's General Store, and they're both looking at something. And this is Will lying on the ground, and his legs moving. He's conscious. And there's the other shot from the previous teaser that is before or after those, where Mike is standing in front of them and Joyce is propping up a struggling Will. So it looks like Vecna enters this scene and confronts our main characters. Maybe Will has already used fire on Vecna and is now weak. Or maybe he's in a weak state right now, but something triggers his powers, and maybe this is when he discovers his powers for the first time as Vecna threatens his friends. Also note the position of the Melvald sign. This suggests that they're looking in the direction of Vecna, and that the fire Vecna was fending off comes from the direction of our heroes. Now, of course, I could be completely wrong. This could be some flamethrower from the army, which would be disappointing, but also less interesting narrative-wise. So I'm going to say that this is likely. This show associates superpowers with the emotional arcs of the characters. It makes the point that Elle strengthens her powers when she taps into a memory of something that makes her angry. And if Will has powers in Season 5, then its discovery and maybe its first outpouring could be an emotional event. One of the scenes from the new teaser shows Will closing his eyes. This could be any number of things, like many shots in the teaser, they are without context. But it's similar to the run shot in that they both don't suggest that he is possessed. His eyes aren't brown, and we've seen what Will is like when he's possessed before. He seems completely out of it. But here, it looks like he's deliberately making the choice to close his eyes, as if he's entering a mind space for some reason, maybe to use a power or to unearth a memory. And we also see tear streaks on his face. He was crying. And there's a red glow on his face right now. It could be a source of fire that he's about to manipulate. This could possibly be an emotional moment that prompts him to use a power. In Firestarter, and now I'm going to give a big spoiler from the end of the movie, Charlie is pushed beyond the brink and has an emotional catharsis that fuels her full power. Her father is killed, and the government agency that's been hounding them is responsible. In the climactic scene, she brings down the government facility by, you guessed it, fireball after fireball. Of course, there's another film from this era, from 1976, actually, Harry, which is more famous, which involves a bullied teenager, one who has telekinetic powers. And big spoiler, when they inflict a humiliating act against her at the end of the movie, she kills the entire school. Oh, and there's fire involved too. Now, Will, of course, is all about bottled up emotion, and he's been bullied for being gay. And this is a season where he possibly comes out or stands up for himself in some way and is subjected to further bullying. Now, I'm not going to say he's going to kill his old school, but if there's anyone who qualifies for the moniker of being the "I've had enough of this shit" protagonist of a Stephen King novel, it is William Byers. Of course, he'll want to find a way to use his powers for good, and he'll want to use them against the monsters in the Upside Down that have wronged him. Now, let's discuss some scenarios in Season 5 concerning Will that could be enhanced by him having supernatural powers. One scenario is one that many people speculating about the show have already talked about, which is Will sacrificing himself for his friends, family, and for Hawkins. Given the powers he already has and his connection with the Upside Down, it isn't far-fetched that he's able to eliminate the Upside Down somehow, or close the gates forever. Doing so could have grave consequences on him. We could have a Harry Potter Horcrux situation. Will is now literally tied to Vecna, as if Will is part of the hive mind. Remember in Season 2 when Will was possessed and part of the hive mind, how they had to free him from the mind flayer before closing the gate because his connection would have killed him? Maybe Will sacrificing himself is the way to weaken or kill Vecna. Or maybe killing Vecna has the collateral effect of killing Will. We know Will is selfless, that has been established many times, and in Season 2, he used Morse code to tell everybody to close the gate. He knew this would kill the monsters connected to the hive mind, and must have known it would have killed himself. But now, unlike then, Will have agency, and he might make the decision himself to pull the trigger. Now, whether he'll actually die, I think it's quite unlikely, for a number of reasons, including the bury your gays trope, avoiding that trope, and other reasons I go over in my Teambyler blog on Tumblr. I might have another video on Stranger Things with a diometer for every character. Like and subscribe. Remember what I said about the Eye of Vecna earlier? That when you remove it, you die? We might see direct reference to it this season and how severing the connection kills its bearer. It also might make a person evil, which feeds into our next scenario. Another scenario, and it's not mutually exclusive from the first, is Will has a villain arc in Season 5, where he gets possessed by Vecna. It could be a direct possession, or if it's Vecna, who likes to toy with people psychologically, preying on his insecurities and self-hatred. And unlike in Season 2, he gets actually fully possessed and becomes a threat to Hawkins, and becomes Vecna's vessel or lieutenant, and has powers, either from within himself or via Vecna. This would, by the way, be another direct reference to another 1980s horror movie, Nightmare on Elm Street 2. It featured a gay-coded main character who was possessed by Freddy Krueger when he went to sleep, and in his dreams and in real life, he killed people, including the classmate he seemed to have a crush on. It's generally accepted now, discussing this particular movie, that the character was gay, and that the movie was a metaphor for his internal conflict over his sexuality. Will's internal conflict and suppression of his sexuality and self-denial could open the psychological door for Vecna to make Will harm his friends. It would be a pretty cool supernatural exploration of the gay closet, and a very intriguing story. And on that note, what if coming out saves the world? I've already talked about how this show grounds superpowers in emotion. This show doesn't treat Elle's superpowers as simply spectacle. They're always tied to her emotional state, and the show explores how her use of powers affects her afterward. Also, this show makes the point that love is more powerful than hate. Elle has greater power when she remembers the love of her mother, which enables a child Elle to defeat the adult one, Henry Vecna, in her flashback in Season 4.
I love
you. So one intriguing scenario is that Will's coming out arc is the key to defeating Vecna. The very qualities that society looks down on in a boy, his empathy, his homosexuality, his love for others, could be what defeats evil. And those same qualities could be what fuel his superpowers. It would further the show's central themes and its mission statement. This is a show that sides with the abused and the marginalized, where the outcasts are heroes. Our core 4 group of nerds are boys who are being bullied for being nerds and other things. The show makes the point that many of the popular kids are quite horrible people. It presents us Eddie, the town pariah, as a hero. The show makes the point that you shouldn't simply conform to what others want of you, and you should be your true self.
It's forced conformity. That's what's killing the kids!
I thought I wanted to be like you.
Popular. Normal. He's just a raging psychopath.
This is a quote from Sean Levy, executive producer and director of the show. Our show is an anthem for the marginalized and imperfect, precisely because the Duffer Brothers know from experience that the popular and easy road is rarely the most interesting one, and that character, grit, connection, and soul are bred in the same moments that challenge us most. Will is at the center of this show's themes. He gets bullied for being a nerd, he gets bullied for going missing and is called Zombie Boy. And as a gay person, he's a pariah in this small town. It's the 1980s, the peak of the AIDS crisis, when gay people were blamed for their own deaths, and where coming out was even more terrifying than it is now. His own father abused him, called him the F-slur, demanded that he conform and play baseball, and the people of Hawkins have bullied him, all to the extent that he has internalized this hatred of him.
When you're different, sometimes you feel like a mistake.
He hates himself and has accepted that he will never find love. Superpowers in horror fiction are often metaphor. Superpowers could be a way to express Will's coming out arc. He may have latent powers waiting to be unleashed that are held in check because he's withholding who he is. His powers are in the closet. And season 5 could be a story of Will's self-realization, of realizing and accepting who he is. Such an internal struggle in Will, triggered by Vecna, is not that far-fetched, and this show already establishes Vecna's method of tormenting people by being the bad voice in their heads that convinces them that they're horrible people and that they're not deserving of love. Max felt guilty for her brother's death and thought she was a shitty person and thought she deserved to die. She got the inner strength to continue fighting on by remembering her friends who love her and seeing that her life was worth living. Will is someone who, by his own admission, says he feels like a mistake and thinks that he will never find love. And these feelings of self-hate and fatalism are ripe material for Vecna. But feeling like he can be himself and that he is deserving of love can be what frees him from Vecna's control. If you haven't already guessed, one way for this to be resolved in a single moment is for Will to realize that his lifelong love for Mike, his best friend, is returned romantically. This is one road to Byler, my friends, and if any of you thought I wasn't going to mention Byler again in this video, you just don't know me. And if some of you are like, what? Just watch my 2.5-hour video where I go over evidence that the show is setting up these two to possibly be a romantic pair. But for now, I'll just give what I call the top 3 Byler bangers. 1, the framing of this shot from the last episode of season 4, where the van drawing shows 2 figures with a circle around them corresponding to Mike and Will, as opposed to Elle, who's outside the circle. 2, Mike couldn't say he loves his own girlfriend until the very end of the season when she's dying, and was only able to do so at the urging of Will, and when Will grafted his own feelings onto Elle, describing a kind of person Mike could feel like he could love, one which doesn't cohere with Elle. And Mike is bound to bring up the painting to Elle, who played no part in it, and Will's lie about the origin of the painting is gonna unravel and force Mike to reckon with how he feels towards Elle and Will. And number 3, what Noah Schnapp, Will's actor, says in response to a question about the romantic possibility between Mike and Will.
You guys can't get me in trouble. I don't want to say it. Spoiler. Okay. I feel like you could tell right from the beginning Mike and Will were like a pair, and you could never really tell if it was like something romantic or just like a really special friendship.
Now, what if Will's emotional arc instead is him accepting himself, giving up on Mike, and moving on? The problem is, we already had that character beat for Will's story. And are we really saying that Will giving up on Mike at the end of season 4 is building up towards a big revelation of his feelings for Mike and lead to a rejection and giving up on Mike again? And that will have Break Will's Heart Part 5 Electric Boogaloo? If we were to have a Will is gay and independent empowerment arc for Will, then there would have had to have been a resolution at the end of season 4 in the van scene when Will shares his feelings, Mike realizes who Will is talking about, and says he'll always love him as a friend. Instead, we have the painting lie, and the person the writers make Will in love with, of all people, is his best friend since childhood. Writers don't write slow burn rejections. They just don't. There's this excellent post on Tumblr that says this by Byler Nation, which I read out in my full Byler video. Writers resolve unrequited crushes quickly, like with Dustin and Max and Steve and Robin. You don't give it this much narrative weight, so much buildup over years towards some grand confession, only to confirm something everybody already knew. No, Will has an arc this season, and in this show, Will said,
I'm not gonna fall in love.
And the show had him say it for the same reason it had Eddie say this.
Look at us. We are not heroes.
These things were said to be proven wrong. Will already accepts who he is and that he'll never be with Mike. Him realizing that more is not an arc. On the other hand, him feeling like he'll never find love because he's gay, but finding love is an arc and something worth writing about. Now, one could write an emotional arc for Will where he finds the inner strength to move on and be a lone gay hero. Remember, I said 80% chance of a Byler culmination. But come on! Him doing that and meeting some random guy in the epilogue is just less interesting and less memorable than a childhood friends to lovers romance, a classic trope. One that the Duffer Brothers can point to 5 years of buildup of things they put in their show that I try to catalog in my Uber video. Meanwhile, Elle's arc has always been about figuring out who she is and finding the friends and family she never had. For Will to overcome Vecna, we might have a 1 versus 11 moment, like in Season 4. There, Elle's mentor had taught her to tap into a memory of anger to fuel her powers, and she flips the script and taps into a memory of love. Will's love could be his gay ultimate. And remember the villain arc for Will? Well, episode 6 of the new season is titled Escape from Camazotz, which is probably a reference to the book A Wrinkle in Time, where a main character gets possessed. A main theme of that book is about how it's okay to be different and not to conform. Camazotz is a planet ruled by a hive mind, and the main character's brother gets possessed by the hive mind and harms people he loves. And a love confession breaks him out of the possession so they can break out from Camazotz. Now, that was a platonic confession among siblings, yes, but the parallel is apt. Will could be made into a villain this season, and the only way he gets the will to break out is when somebody confesses love for him. All right, a few final thoughts. Stranger Things is a show inspired by 1980s horror and sci-fi stories. And those stories often used monsters and horror as metaphor to explore real-world issues like alienation, discrimination, and abuse. Similarly, superpowers serve as metaphors for growing up, puberty, sexuality, and power. But Stranger Things is not a cynical or pessimistic story like many of those horror stories. It's a heroic story. It also draws inspiration from 80s flicks where kids save the world. While it might have monsters in alternate dimensions, ultimately it is like Lord of the Rings, another fantastical tale about how people can band together against overwhelming odds and find the capacity to confront and defeat real life evil. Will getting powers not only makes sense for the plot, but is also a way to use the show's supernatural nature to advance his character arc. Now, I don't know if he'll get fire powers exactly, but I think what I've explored in this video show that his connection to the Upside Down and Vecna can be ways to explore these same themes. As the Duffers have said, this emotional arc for Will is what we feel is going to hopefully tie the whole series together. This show has made Hawkins itself an adversary, a place prone to fear-mongering and conservatism. The town blaming D&D and the Hellfire Club, of which some of our main characters are members, has to be explored this season. Will, as a person who hangs out and probably plays with that same club, who is a gay person in said town in the 1980s, has been set up to be the show's ultimate protagonist. The character who most typifies the themes of this show and is the center of the story. This show, every season, has made the audience empathize with Will. He's been a victim of society and of the supernatural. Now, it only makes sense story-wise for Will to find the capacity within himself to make the supernatural that has tormented him all these years somehow work for him. The first 2 seasons, Will had to be saved. Season 5 can be where Will does the saving. Hawkins' ultimate outcast can be its hero. So that's it. Those are my thoughts on Will possibly getting powers in Season 5, and also on him going gay. And remember, I could be wrong, 40% chance of being wrong, in fact, but I hope that this show fulfills the potential of the story it has set up and uses its supernatural elements to tell a story that resonates. And I have not lost sight of the fact that if this season is about Will growing in confidence and coming into his own as a young man and having fire powers, then the hero of Hawkins will be a flaming gay guy. Like and subscribe if you like what I have to say. I plan to do more videos on entertainment that I like. I'll also post edited versions of my reactions to the Season 5 episodes. If you're intrigued by what I say about Byler, see my big video on my channel, link at the end. I have been Ronald, keeping it real and off the record. Thank you for watching.